Today is a regular voting meeting of the Prescott City Council, Tuesday, January 12, 2016. I want to thank everybody that came out today, whether you're going to give a presentation or just listen or give us your opinion. I think we might have some introductions here that the Pro Tem would like to make.
Sure, you betcha. Number one, I'd like to welcome Councilwoman Mary Ann Suttles. Thanks for being in the audience, Mary Ann.
Thank you, Council.
You're welcome. And then I would like to also recognize Commissioners Menser, Sheets, and Maverick. Thank you for sharing your time with us, your volunteerism. You know, you get really paid a lot of money to do that job. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Okay, thank you. We'll have invocation by Reverend Diane Dixon from the Unity Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by the Mayor Pro Tem.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we ask your blessing on this country and the city of Prescott. We also ask your blessing on this council. Impart your wisdom on the decisions, knowing that the implications of their actions will last many, many years and benefit our children. Guide them with your grace and patience. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, roll call, please.
Mayor Oberg,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lamerson,
here.
Councilman Blair,
Yes.
Councilman Lozelle,
Here.
Councilwoman Orr,
Here.
Councilman Shiska,
Here.
and Councilwoman Wilcox.
Here.
All present.
Okay, thank you. City Manager, you have any announcements?
No public announcements, Mayor.
Okay. I have one public announcement. As you know, we have a problem with drug rehab homes there. There's a lot of problem with drugs in the community and really across the state and in the nation. And I think there's a simulcast that's going to be occurring tomorrow on heroin in an effort to dramatically raise the awareness of the rise of heroin and opiate use in Arizona. All 33 TV broadcast stations tomorrow will air at 6:30 an investigative report produced by the students of Arizona State University. This will also be it'll be commercial free, and it will also be aired at the same time on 98 radio stations in the state. So anybody that wants to understand some of the problems that we're having here with drugs, overdoses, deaths, and also what's driving a lot of the rehab community here, this is an opportunity to kind of get a little understanding of what we're going to be going into, because we're going to be discussing this much more in the near future also. We have a couple presentations this morning, and I got a whole bunch of folks out there with black hats, so I'm not sure who's going to be the stuckee that wants to get up and talk, but come forward and give us your presentation, please.
Thank you.
Almost got poked with that thing. Honorable Mayor Oberg, honorable council persons Lamerson and Orr and Lozelle and Wilcox and Shishka and Blair. First of all, let me thank all of you for this opportunity to address the council on what is an urgent matter for Prescott Frontier Days, and a special thanks to you, Councilperson Lozelle, for getting us on the calendar. And that urgent matter is the renewal and extension of the lease of the Prescott Frontier Days rodeo grounds to the world's oldest rodeo. My name is Joe Butner, and I'm president of Prescott Frontier Days, Inc., a nonprofit Arizona corporation. I've been with the rodeo a little over 25 years, but we have here before you today people on our board of directors and other volunteers in our rodeo that have worked on putting on this rodeo for 40, 50 years. And a general manager that grew up next door to the rodeo grounds over 60 years ago, sneaking under the fence to watch it. you'll hear from him a little bit later. He went on to become a world champion bareback rider and a multiple-year champion at Prescott Frontier Days. Now, the urgency of this situation is that our lease on the rodeo grounds expires in less than 2 years. We are now at the point where we cannot book the specialty acts that help make our rodeo great. They must be booked at least 3 years in advance for many of them, and if you don't get them booked, they're already booked when you go to get them. We need a long-term lease. 50 years, I would suggest, in order to make the capital improvements necessary to continue to maintain and improve the rodeo grounds. Our original lease from Yavapai County was only for 15 years. There was a large amount of deferred maintenance that needed to be corrected, and you'll see from the numbers reflected on page 12, in fact, maybe I can get to that page. There. That at the onset, we had to do a lot of deferred maintenance. We need a 50-year lease, 35 years at the least, to finance and pay for major capital improvements. To give you an example, we have paid over $220,000 to rent grandstands over the past few years. With a long-term lease, we could have bought those grandstands. The rodeo has been at that arena for over 100 years. 2016 is the 130th Prescott Frontier Days Rodeo, older than the United States Open Golf Tournament. We have old-timers from our rodeo that remember Will Rogers coming to our rodeo. Cowboy movie star Tom Mix was a regular participant in 1919 and the Roaring Twenties, and in fact won back then it was steer riding at our rodeo. True West magazine for 2016 awards our rodeo Best Historic Western Rodeo. Yahoo Travel says Prescott Frontier Days is the one event in Arizona you cannot miss. The Huffington Post says it's the number 3 spot in the United States to get your cowboy fix. All of this leads to the question of what does this do for the city of Prescott? The answer is there is an economic impact to the city of Prescott of more than $11 million every year in the form of tourists and tax dollars. Everyone knows how the hotels are full and the restaurants are packed during the rodeo. The rodeo parade is the quintessential small town parade for the state of Arizona. Everybody's hometown parade. Ticket sales for the rodeo are better than ever, with multiple sellout performances and demand for significantly more seats on the weekend dates. Of our 8 performances, the City of Prescott and Prescott Frontier Days, Inc. have partnered for significant capital improvements to the rodeo facility. To improve its usability. An outstanding example of that is the Mackin Building deck, which we built together. Prescott Frontier Days, Inc. has spent over $300,000, there it is, in making improvements to the facility during the years that we've been there. Let's get this lease extension done promptly in order that we can make more long-term improvements and bring more business to the city of Prescott and the Prescott Frontier Days Rodeo. And now, the guy that used to sneak under the fence, our general manager, J.C. Trujillo, will tell you about our year-round operation and what he recently accomplished for the downtown businesses of Prescott. And if I can find number 7. Thank you for your attention.
I got one question.
Yes, sir.
Top international attendees, that's the people just coming to watch the show from these various countries.
All over the world, right? And we gave you that packet so that, of course, we hope you look at it later and bear it in mind when you make that enlightened decision to extend that lease promptly for 50 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor and council people, I'm the guy that used to sneak underneath the fence. And actually, we lived right across from the rodeo grounds, and my brother and I could sneak into any event they had over there. And by golly, maybe that's one of the reasons I became a rodeo cowboy. But you know, my family came here in 1919. My dad came to Prescott. I was born and raised here. We don't find a lot of people like that in Prescott anymore. I started my rodeo career here in Prescott and had a great time. About 13 years ago, I was confronted by the Prescott Frontier Days to turn in my resume. They were looking for a general manager. And by golly, they picked me, and it's been a great ride. I wanted to share a little bit with you the events that we have in Prescott. We have a whole list of them. We stay busy pretty much year-round anymore. We have every kind of youth rodeo. We have a junior high rodeo. We have a high school rodeo. We have a AJRA, which is Arizona Junior Rodeo Association. And we have many events there, barrel races, horse shows. And this last year, as all of you know, by golly, we had the Yavapai County Fair, and we were really thrilled to have it back in Prescott, Arizona. You know, all these events, and I find this out from the businesses around Prescott, that really, really appreciate having the high school rodeo where there's over 1,200 participants, and along with their mom and dad and their family. And it really brings a lot of money and a lot of interest into Prescott, Arizona, and we really enjoy that with all our different events. The Prescott Frontier Days has a long-standing reputation, not only in Prescott, but in the professional rodeo world. They, you know, to do a little history, the Prescott Frontier Days probably wasn't the first rodeo that ever happened, but it was the first rodeo that ever charged an admission, creating a fan base for professional rodeo. They also did the first entry fee where a cowboy had to pay an entry fee, creating that contest, which they called a cowboy tournament. And down through the years, the Prescott Frontier Days also, in their early years, put the first rule book together and the set of rules. And to this day, the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association go off of that original rule book and are still using a lot of those rules that was adapted years and years ago here right in our hometown of Prescott. The Prescott Rodeo is not only a great benefit for Prescott, the city of Prescott and surrounding areas, it's a great benefit for local people. It's a great benefit for the Prescott reputation. The rodeo cowboys in today's world have always look forward to coming to the Prescott Rodeo. We have every world's champion, every current world's champion competed our rodeo, along with 11 times Contractor of the Year, Harry Vold. We have the top stock. We've put a lot of money into bringing this rodeo to a high level. Every performance that we have, each cowboy in any of the events has an opportunity to win. We've put up this year, we're putting 13,000 an event up in each event, and that's what draws these professional rodeo cowboys to our rodeo. We paid out last year about $265,000 in prize money at our rodeo, which we're very proud of. And this money comes not only from ticket sales, but our national and local sponsors, and we're very proud of that. I think back in the days when I first started rodeoing, my first contest ever was right here in Prescott, Arizona, at a junior rodeo, and my first professional rodeo was here in Prescott also. So I think, when you look back at the value of the Prescott Frontier Days and the sport of rodeo, the respect that we have for that rodeo, I'm sure none of us want to see that go anywhere else. The rodeo, as I said, not only benefits the city of Prescott, the professional rodeo cowboys, but it also benefits the Western heritage and the Western way of life and the cowboy way of life. And we've got plans on doing some great things at the rodeo grounds. If we have this long-term contract, by golly, we can all make it become a reality. So I would like to urge you all again to really look at this. We are looking for a long-term lease, and the contract that we had with the county, I think you could go off of something like that, because that county contract worked pretty good for us, and then you could use that as a template or whatever, But let's really consider this and get this ball rolling, because the sooner the better for us, and we can all work together. I've had a great relationship with the city manager, and of course a lot of you on the board, on the council here. So again, I would urge you all to think about all the heritage that we have here, what it does, the economic impact of the rodeo, and by golly, let's put this thing together and let's make a deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, J.C. J.C. and I go back a long ways. We went to school together, went to church together. Families had the same church, and as far as I'm concerned, rodeo is like apple pie and mother. It's just something that's part of our culture here, our heritage, and we want to do everything we can to support it. I normally don't offer any comments from the dais for presentations, but in this particular case, if anybody would like to take a moment and say something, I'll be more than happy to let you have a moment or two to talk.
The only thing I'd like to say, Mayor, is I'd like to get this over with and get a contract signed so that the Rodeo Association and the Frontier Days can get on with the things they want to do, but we want to make sure that the city's, both parties have a say and a good compromise, and let's just get it going.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank all of you guys and gals with Prescott Frontier Days. You have meant so much to this community, and you have put in so much time, and it's, honest to God, I think JC's one of the only paid people up there. And so for all the hours, all the love and dedication, thank you so, so much.
Just real quick, Mayor, that past councils put together an opportunity to purchase the property from the county, and they did it for a reason. And that reason was to keep the rodeo here. We didn't want to have happen what happened with our great commitment of our fairgrounds that left our community, and guess what? They're back. And they're back where they need to be, so we need to get this done sooner than later.
I'd just like to say ditto to everything that's been said, but True West magazine just named Prescott as the best place to live, best Western city to live in, and I believe it's because of our rodeo for sure. So thank you all for what you do. It's really fun to go, and it's fun to be a part of the whole culture and what goes on not only that week but year round. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Concert with many of my fellow council, thank the volunteers of the Rodeo Association for the economic opportunity in the city of Prescott. It's truly a private-public partnership where we as a municipality have provided the opportunity within the free market for a collaborative effort with the Rodeo Association to bring something, for the lack of a better word, under economic development opportunities. And it's been very successful. And it's not a government-regulated deal. It's one of these deals where the government works with the private sector to see that it's successful. So I'm sure that we will work diligently to come up with something that's palatable for their opportunity to invest in this community in the future. Being in business, I understand why it's difficult to plan on plans the next 3, 4, 5 years if you don't have some sort of assurance that in the next 3, 4, 5 years that the land that you're using isn't gone. So just sharing that with you.
Okay. Councilman Wilcox.
Thank you, Mayor. It took me a couple years to be converted to the rodeo since I didn't grow up in the West, but it is a really fun event to go to, and I'm happy to see the long list of events that you have year-round. Hopefully that we can make even better use of the rodeo with long-term improvements, which I think are very, very much needed and very important to get more people here. It's a great little venue, not only for the rodeo, for horse shows, music, lots of things. So I look forward to a long-term lease as well.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Joe, JC, appreciate it. Thanks for coming in and giving us this information, and we'll start working on it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our next presentation. We have Bruce and Celeste Sozoff.
How you doing? My name is Bruce Senko. I live at 3042 La Cuesta, Prescott, and my wife, she's not feeling that well, but she came up. Her name's Celeste Sozoff, so we got two names. I want to thank you all for serving. I appreciate what you do, and I know it's not paid that well. So, my wife and I were here a couple weeks, I think December 1st, when Public Works gave a presentation about how they do their business and some other things, and we wanted to talk at that time because we've had some experiences and trying to get some resolution to some issues. And I know Public Works talked about how they like to present options and stuff, and we were hoping to get an opportunity at that time, and I guess that wasn't available, but we appreciate the opportunity now. I'm probably one of the most impatient people you'd ever meet, but I think when I go through this, you'll find out that I've been remarkably patient. We moved here and built a home, and in August we had noticed some excessive speeding on our road. We contacted the city, and they came out and basically did a traffic study, and they determined that, yes, we had a speeding problem. They said, I think it was one day we had 21 cars driving over 35 miles per hour. We had some cars doing 45, fairly significant. I'd like to note that somebody hit by a car doing 30 is 3 times more likely to die than somebody hit by a car doing 25. I mean, that's from the National Highway Traffic Safety Association. So it's fairly significant, just that 5 miles per hour in a neighborhood. And we had people doing 45 and routinely 35. So anyway, long story short, the city gave us the traffic calming policy and sent us on our way to gather signatures. We spent close to 20 hours walking the neighborhood, approaching people, which some of these people were the people speeding. It's not all, it's a lot of visitors as well, and got a petition. In March, we gave the petition to the city with all the signed names, and I could provide this later. We exchanged emails, and then in April, the city agreed that we should hold a meeting. They told us to get a group of neighbors together, and we'll talk with the city. They were going to talk with the city engineer and get back to us on a time frame. That's the last we heard about having that meeting. We never got a meeting scheduled. So I went in a different direction. I thought, well, you know, you gotta help yourself. So we went in a different direction. We contacted an organization called Keep Kids Alive, Drive 25, a nationwide organization. I think the founder's child was killed in his neighborhood. Contacted them, and they gave us some information, told us how to go about some things. We contacted the city and asked if we could put up these stickers on trash cans. That's kind of how they do their business. City said yes, we could. So my HOA and I bought some of these and we put them on trash cans. It's made a difference one day. You know, it made a difference that one day, and also we found that they're now getting ripped off by, you know, the constant unloading of the trash, you know, into the garbage truck. So basically, we decided to cover a full 7 days, we'd go purchase some signs. So the HOA and I also went out and we purchased some signs. Soon after they were up, about a day or two later, somebody from the city called our HOA president and said the signs had to come down. We weren't given a specific reason, just they had to come down. And I know we've all been discussing signs. I was here last week, or, you know, when you guys had your sign discussion, and that's maybe we're involved. But anyway, we immediately went down to the city to try to find out who said they had to come down and why. Never found that person, but we found another gentleman in planning who told us kind of basically 100% disagreed with the opinion that was given to our HOA president. They agreed to come down and meet with us at our location with the other individuals from staff. That was set up on September 17th. The planning person showed up, the other staff did not. We went through the same discussion again, that didn't see a problem since we weren't selling anything. It just said, please slow down, drive 25, and I have the sign here. Anyway, he agreed we'd get together with other city staff. We'd have another meeting to discuss, you know, where we could place these signs. Never heard back. I called, left messages, several emails, never heard back. That dropped by the wayside. That brings us here today. I don't know if you're aware of the city traffic calming policy, but there is a policy. It's quite cumbersome. I think that's intentional. Puts the burden on people to go walk around their neighborhood and do that. I think there's something in here. There used to be a committee that was set up to advise the council. I think that possibly should be reestablished because we're not getting answers, which we'd like. You know, when we're set on our way, it would be nice to get the answers from the city, so there is that policy. I would also like to get a letter from somebody that says where we can put that sign, you know, to our HOA president. And lastly, I think I'd like to get a meeting set up where I can discuss with some city staff, you know, what a cost-effective option would be for our neighborhood. You know, it doesn't, you know, the policy talks about speed bumps and 5 other items. The city seems very focused on speed bumps. Yes, they're the most effective deterrent to speeding, but they're not the only deterrent. The city has used flexible delineators, little plastic things. Fire truck could go right over the top of them, you know, if that was the case. You know, there's a lot of options available that may be not as effective, but still would provide a deterrent to speeding in our neighborhood. And like I said, 5 miles per hour is 3 times more likely to die. 35, 45, what's that? So that's why we're here. We're trying to get something addressed and maybe see if the city council wants to recreate the traffic committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll be working with the city manager on this. We'll get back to you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, we'll move to consent agenda.
Consent agenda. Item 1A, approval of minutes for the city council meetings held on December 15, 2015 and January 5, 2016. Item B, approval of annual support and maintenance for on-base document imaging system software by DataBank IMX in the amount of $36,594.57 using State of Arizona contract number EPS 090009-3 pricing, various funds. Item C, approval to accept a grant renewal from the Arizona Governor's Office for Children, Youth, and Families for sexual assault victim advocacy training in the amount of $16,900. Item D, approval of purchase of light-duty tires from authorized approved dealers using Arizona State Contract Number ADSP 012-021289, pricing in the annual estimated amount of $60,000. City Contract Number 2016-01-106, General 1% Street Open Space, Airport Engineering, Wastewater, and Water Funds. Item E, approval of a 5-year lease agreement with Arizona Office Technologies for a Xerox 7845 copier using state contract pricing in the total estimated amount of $12,574.20 for use in the Prescott Regional Communications Center. Item F, approval of amendment number 1 to city contract number 2015-085A1 with ExecuTime for a time and attendance import module, annual support maintenance, and on-site technical training in an amount not to exceed $15,000, various funds. And item G, approval for purchase of one Trimble Geo 7 Series GIS data collector from Allen Instruments and Supplies using Arizona State contract pricing in the amount of $15,342.56, water and wastewater funds.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to have anything removed from the consent agenda? If not, do I have a motion?
Mayor, move to approve items 1A through 1G.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Vote, please. You got both yours up, Bill?
Oh, sorry.
Passes unanimously.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item.
Item 2A, CC 105-001, Comprehensive Sign Plan for the Touchmark at the Ranch Planned Area Development, Zoning Business Regional BR, APN 103-20-632, owner Touchmark at the Ranch LLC, 5150 Southwest Griffith Drive, Beaverton, Oregon 97005.
Thank you, Mayor. This request for a comprehensive sign plan affects the Touchmark development, which is located on Highway 69, directly across State Route 69 from the mall. The location of the signs is depicted on some of the information that we provided to you in your packet. There are only 2 signs that are really visible from off of the site, and I will concentrate on those if you don't mind. The internal signage, I think, is pretty clear in the presentation and in the materials that we've given you. There were very few comments or suggestions at the Planning Commission review of the proposed comprehensive sign plan relating to those internal signs. The first external sign is actually at the end of Lee Boulevard. If I can point at it with something here, at a point where it turns into the private Touchmark Boulevard, which will lead into the project. So it's at the location where it converts from a public street to a private street, becomes the entrance to Touchmark, and it's a sign arch that crosses over the street. It looks somewhat ranch-like, and it was the intent of Touchmark to have some ranch association or feel to their sign package, and this was their proposal. It's been reviewed. There may be some adjustments to the height of it to make sure it meets all of our minimum height requirements for crossing over public rights-of-way. That was a relatively innocuous sign, but is visible from off of the site. So that was one of the major items for discussion by the Planning Commission when they reviewed this item. The second sign that is visible from off of the site is an existing sign located here on top of the hill above the highway cut for State Route 69. That sign has been converted to say Touchmark temporarily.
I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sir.
If I can, Mayor. Sure. When are you going to have the height of the sign? From my standpoint, I'm very curious that if this is a sign that's overreaching the road and semis are going to be delivering groceries to that facility, I would suspect that you would have to have some kind of idea how high that...
Yes, sir. It's proposed at 17 feet clear underneath of the sign. The question is, how far out does it have to extend beyond that to maintain the 17 feet clear to the edges of the roadway? It may be fine. That is something that's part of the review process for the actual building permit that goes with signs installations. So we do know that it'll be 17 feet at the top of the arch right below the little oval Touchmark. So the sign on top of the hill that's visible from off-site currently looks like this. It was an existing sign for the ranch at Prescott. It is a temporary paint job in place at this point in time. At the time it went to the Planning Commission, there was some discussion about what it would look like, and I apologize, some of this is a little hard to read. Let's see if I can make it lighter. No, it didn't help very much. Along the side of the sign are columns that would be proposed. These are faux stone. That helps. Thank you, sir. They're fake stone columns. The intent is to cover up the edges of the sign where it just abruptly ends at the moment, and make it look a little bit more natural on site and blend in more with the other signs that are proposed on site. The light-colored background, the tan background, was a topic of discussion of the Planning Commission, and one of the issues that they felt would be necessary to approach at this point in time is to determine a darker color for that sign based on a requirement that exists for the Highway 69 corridor, it's called, in the Land Development Code. One of the things that we use for that is called a light reflective value, an LRV. The Planning Commission discussed reducing that to a darker background, and in fact the Touchmark sign company came back to the city with a rendering of a darker color which meets the minimum requirement of the 60 LRV requirement and would meet the intent of the Planning Commission's review and recommendation. So after the Planning Commission review and discussion of this, some discussion occurred between the Commission and the applicants as to potential conditions that could be placed on the approval of this comprehensive sign plan. Of those, 3 were in play particularly, and most of the discussion occurred relating to those 3. One was the LRV, the background color of the sign. The other was the lighting of the sign or non-lighting of the sign. The original sign that was up there that was painted white wasn't lighted. It was daytime only use sign. Touchmark, the sign company for Touchmark, put temporary lighting up there, and that temporary lighting almost immediately generated comments and complaints from nearby property owners who could see it. So we advised them that needed to be removed until this sign plan could go through its review process, and they promptly did so. At the Planning Commission meeting and during the discussion, it was determined that lighting that sign would cause adverse impacts on nearby property owners, and the Touchmark representative at that time agreed during the discussion not to light the sign, that they would stick to a sign that was visible in daylight primarily. The third thing that came up during the discussion, and it was a primary topic of discussion, it was relating to keeping that sign in place long term. The planning commissioners had a discussion with the owners about limiting the maintenance of that sign or the maintaining of that sign for a 2-year period, and then they could come back to Planning Commission and City Council to reevaluate and request either a modification of the comprehensive sign plan or an extension of the comprehensive sign plan to allow the sign to stay longer. That was also agreed to by the representative at that time. And ultimately, the Planning Commission's recommendation to you contained that as part of their passing the ball forward, so to speak, for action by this council. After the staff report was written to council, we heard from a couple of the members of the Planning Commission that they felt like the specifics that were included in their motion were not adequately covered or completely covered by the language in the follow-up staff report. So we've provided you the actual motion language from the Planning Commission for you to look at in an addendum that was presented to you by the city clerk. And I'm going to put that up on the screen. I know it's hard to read for council members, but for the audience, I think it would be very helpful. This lays out the specific requirements. This is what was negotiated between the Planning Commission and the representative of Touchmark. It includes limitation on the sign for 2 years, limitation on the color to a 60 or less LRV, and that's darker, than the original, and no nighttime lighting of that sign. And as a result of that negotiation, the planning commissioners voted 5-0 unanimously of those present to approve that and pass it on to you. It was somewhat consolidated in our staff report to you, and we want to make sure you see the actual language as it was proposed by planning commissioners. We do have a representative here from Touchmark, as well as the planning commissioners that Mayor Pro Tem Lamerson introduced earlier in the meeting, who would be available for questions should you have them, and of course staff would be available for any questions should you have them. The recommendation in the staff report to you should have also included this. It does, but not in the recommendation box at the bottom, and for that was a little bit of confusion, so we apologize. This motion would be an appropriate motion, just as the one that was attached to the staff report. If council wants to follow along with the exact recommendation of Planning Commission, then this would be your motion for action today. And if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Any comments from the, yes?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. George, isn't there also a sign on Highway 69 at the intersection of Walker Road? It's right in front of the Residence Inn.
There's a billboard sign down there, yes. Yes,
But
and I believe that
that's not being
Touchmark has...
considered?
No, off-site signage billboards are something that can be... The message can change on billboard signs. Under our current code, off-site signage is prohibited, so no new off-site signs are allowed. Those that exist could continue to have the face changed out as economic incentives would apply. Anyone wanting to purchase space on a billboard sign anywhere in town can attempt to do so through the company that manages the billboard sign. So we understand Touchmark has purchased the space on that sign for a period of time. I do not know how much time. But that's not considered part of an on-site sign package and would not be covered by a comprehensive sign plan.
Okay, well, I can only support approving this request if all those large billboard signs are removed. The sign on top of the hill, the sign at Walker and Gurley, just aren't necessary. There's going to be soon appearing a 70-foot high building, which, if it's built according to the design, will be a very nice looking building. It will attract everyone's attention. They don't need marketing through a billboard. And the second condition I would put on it is that Touchmark pay all of the permit and inspection fees that were waived as part of the development agreement that this former council approved. I opposed it because I don't think that it was right to waive $500,000 worth of fees and put us in a situation now, today, where we have to close the library on Sunday. We're browning out fire stations, and we're raising everyone else's permit fees because Touchmark got a $500,000 break. That's just not right. In fact, I think it's corrupt. So I'm voting against it.
Anyone else? Do we have any comment from the public?
Good afternoon, Mayor Oberg and council members. My name is Tom Beal, and I'm with Touchmark, and thank you for the presentation. First, I want to say that I look forward to paying full admission to the rodeo and then sneaking under the fence. So, but it sounds like a great fun and legacy. So, on the sign package, we work closely with two local companies, Sketch Landscape Architecture and Morgan Sign, and trying to be authentic and have tasteful signs in this area, and they're here to answer questions as well. The sign along the highway, my understanding is that's a temporary use for about 18 months, and that will go away automatically on the red and white sign that's out by the Marriott Residence Inn. So that has a deadline on it. We're trying to have a very tasteful sign here. The sign that appears today, and we agree, it's not a very tasteful sign, and we would like to be more of a monument sign for the business. And it's a very large investment that we're making, and we're joining other people here. We're happy to join other people that are providing, services and care and lifestyle to mature adults. But it is a significant investment. We don't, in business, you don't want to be the best kept secret or you go out of business. And so we think that that sign is important. We would like to work hard to make that look like a monument sign, not a billboard on the hill, and that was our goal in this redesign. So right now it actually has a temporary wrap on it, and unfortunately it did have a white background. It's too reflective, it's too gaudy. We agree with the commissioners on that, and so we look forward to making that look more like a monument sign for any similar property in Prescott. So that is our goal, to blend in, to look professional, and to have the right message. But we don't. I've worked at many of our Touchmark communities. I've been with the company for over 30 years. I operated the property in Oregon before moving here for 14 years, serving wonderful adults. And people drive by and they don't know, is that a housing development? Is it real estate? We're not real estate. Is it assisted living only? We're an active adult lifestyle community with a licensed care and a whole continuum, and so there's a lot to it. We would hope that people that, since we put that sign up, some people have said, I was in town from Texas over the winter, for example. I just talked to a gentleman from Texas. He said, my mother lives close by. I didn't know of this development. I saw that. I looked at your website, and now I'm contacting you because this could be a great opportunity for her to stay close to friends. But we're also to market to people like that, sons and daughters, family that are people that are coming through that would like to live in Prescott. So for that reason, we think that's a nice sign. We don't want it to look like a billboard on the hill. Someday when there's tasteful buildings behind that sign, we think that'll look much less like a billboard as well. And on the height, of course, we're just building our typical 4-story building. The measurements that we all went through before are measured from the bottom of the parking structure basement to the peak of the roof. And so it's really our typical 4-story building that we've built all through Western U.S. and Canada.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
I have a question of the gentleman.
Yeah, go ahead.
Either that or the bean counter, and I don't see him here today. What is the projected annual economic impact of Touchmark, considering sales tax, bed tax, jobs, etc., for the city of Prescott for this project?
So this is a little larger than the last community I operated. We'll have a we'll have a payroll budget of $5 to $7 million. We'll have over 150 staff members. This is a little larger. Our last community, when I left, we had 158 staff. Here we would probably have closer to 180. I just talked to one of my executive directors at one of our sister communities. They have 240 staff members today in Boise, Idaho. And so any other questions?
How many patients, estimated, would you, or not patients,
Residents, right. So the approval is for 379 homes. We'll reach that if we do the villas instead of some more.
So that'd be 379 families visiting these 379.
The 379 homes, typically that's about 450 total residents. And we find it takes a village to serve that many people and do it successfully.
Yeah, maybe my question was better directed towards Mr. Geis or Mr. Worley with regards to potential impact regarding bed tax, sales tax, etc., not just the fact that we're going to have residents living in the area. But if I understand this correctly, this is a one-stop shopping, and that there's going to be rental units as well as permanent units that then go into rental units that go into a last stage rental unit, etc., those types of things. So if I'm not mistaken, transient occupancy tax comes into play, sales tax comes into play. There's kind of like the gift that keeps on giving with some of these units, while it may not be on all of them. Maybe you can help me out there a little bit, Mr. Manager, if staff doesn't have that information.
Well, Mayor Pro Tem, we would have to check back or go back to the record, the minutes, and certainly the staff materials that were generated at the time the council entered into the development agreement with Touchmark. So I don't have a number for you as we sit here today, but obviously it was substantial. It was weighed by the council sitting at the time in terms of a win-win, in terms of economic benefit, vis-a-vis the permit fees which were waived. I might also indicate that it was not entirely permit fees being waived. It was effectively a partnership and credit for utility improvements that improved the performance of our utility system by looping. So it was a little bit more involved in that.
Thank you very much for your input, because there's more to this than just we're giving Touchmark $800,000 of a gimme, because that's not necessarily true. So
There are ongoing sales tax on care levels, on all the rentals as you speak, and care levels, on the rental room and board, and also on the labor and materials for building homes. So yes, there'll be ongoing sales tax.
thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask, somebody asked me the other day if in fact all of the rooms in this resort pay a bed tax. Is that true?
That will depend on the longevity of the stay at the various locations. Some of what they're building are actually homes.
A couple of points. One, the bed tax is only for transient lodging, so usually 30 days or less. But I would also caution that talking about anything other than the comprehensive sign package, which is on the agenda, may get us sort of out of what was noticed up to discuss further. So sort of caution the council that this is about comprehensive sign package and really nothing else. It sort of has to stand on its own under the zoning code.
Point taken.
Thank you.
And I thought I got testy at P&Z. Mayor, Council, Ken Mabarak, 122 North Cortez, Suite 110. I'm a commissioner on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Just want to say a few things in reference, and our concerns have nothing to do with prior action. Just wanted to clarify a little bit as to what happened at our meeting this time in reference to the sign package. We evaluated the sign package in the same manner we evaluated Touchmark, I don't know, 6-8 months ago when they came in for their site plan, development plan. Great addition to the city, something that we could use. It's really great employment, big investment. Trust me, I understand all those things ourselves. They, I think, will be a great neighbor to us and a great part of our community. One of the things we face at P&Z is how to look at our community from a planning and a zoning perspective and have things fit in while things always change. Architecture changes, design changes, needs change. And it's not always easy. One of the things we get in our sessions is people saying, well, you did it for them, and if we do this, and some of our decisions are based on, well, if we do it for this group, what are we going to do the next time someone comes in? Signs are certainly one of the major items where that issue comes up. I do recall last year when we were looking at the site plan, and I'll admit that most of the discussion as to this billboard was generated by me. Last year I had a real problem with the billboard. And Mr. Lee's here in the audience, and perhaps you can help correct me if I get off base here, but my understanding is that sign, that billboard, was to sell lots at the ranch, or to let people know that the ranch of Prescott was here. And it has, I don't know how many hundreds of acres at the ranch. And it served its purpose for that. It wasn't a billboard for this particular property. And I want to make that clear because in my mind, and I made the motion, and the motion would have been tougher had we not made an agreement with Mr. Beal. In my mind, that's a billboard and not a sign for the project. That was a billboard for the ranch at Prescott. And I look, when I drive down Highway 69 as a consumer, I see a billboard. I don't see it as a business sign. We face other businesses coming to us for comprehensive sign packages. In this particular case, they came to, in round numbers, a 500 square foot sign package. George, if I'm correct, they were allowed about 300 square feet by design?
Approximately correct, yes, sir.
That billboard happens to be 200 square feet. So it became part of their sign package. Now, my mentality, having been around here since the mid-'80s, that's a billboard, not a sign. I don't know if there's much of a distinction. But we have other businesses that would love huge signs that had been on the property before. So our mentality was, how do we make this so that we don't have to be tripping over ourselves in the future with other requests, and yet cooperate with somebody who's making a great investment in our community? And I think a pretty solid investment. The sign package that they came up with, it's really pretty artsy, pretty clever, and very creative. So we have no trouble. There was no discussion on the rest of the signs, except for the same question that Steve asked about the height of this one. So I just wanted to clear it up. This is not about Touchmark. I'm hoping the swarm of bees that just got swatted over prior council's decisions goes away. And it's not about anything this group has done. This is about the commissioners voting 5-0 that particular sign had an issue. Many of us felt it should have gone away now. It shouldn't have been part of the whole package. We understand the multi-million-dollar investment. We were there when we granted the 20-foot, when we recommended approval for the 20-foot increase in height over the business zoning at the time. So, and when we talked with Mr. Beal, I said, geez, you're going to have a 5-story building. Why do you need a sign? He said, well, that's not going to be up for a couple of years. So I just wanted to clear that up. We're happy. If this is the motion, this really does clarify what happened at the PNC. But I wanted you to hear some of the background as to why that sign became a question. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to discuss them with you.
Thank you, Ken, for standing up. I laboriously sat through hours with P&Z through the negotiation process, and with due respect to my attorney, I'm not trying to talk any different than the sign package, but there was a lot of things that took place to create the sign package that's being proposed, which was inclusive of many other things other than just the size of a sign stuck in one spot.
That's correct.
Okay, and what was taken into consideration and what was made as part of the recommendation to the council right along the way, whether it was this council or the last council, whether it was just P&Z or one of the other commissions that we appoint, was more than just this.
Absolutely.
So I'm just sharing that with you. So that was my point, Mr. Attorney, of bringing in. There were a lot of things taken into consideration through the negotiation process that brought us to this point. And it wasn't just the comprehensive sign package.
And we have to remember that the comprehensive sign package requested additional footage. And so that's why this particular, I'm still going to call it a billboard, becomes the issue, because that is the amount of overage that had this come down, there would have been no question as to, there would have been no approval required. They would have met their thing. So I just wanted to clear that up for you. Thank you.
Councilwoman Orr.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Marbury, thank you very much. I would like to say to the P&Z Commission, I appreciate the amendments that you made, taking away the lighting for the nighttime. I think that's a great idea. And the idea that we will look at this again in 2 years. I think the signs themselves are absolutely beautiful, very classy. I think it'll be a nice addition to the city. So certainly I don't see any problems with the signs, but I am glad we did away with the nighttime lighting. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Any further public discussion? You do have a motion?
I make a motion.
1 second. I think Dan, okay. All right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I make a motion to approve CC 15-001, comprehensive sign plan for Touchmark at the Ranch, PAD, with the modifications. Number 1, the sign permit for the sign facing SR State Route 69 will have a 2-year expiration. And number 2, the LRV of that sign will be at 60 or less. And number 3, no nighttime lighting allowed on that sign.
Second.
Can I have a motion and a second? Vote, please.
Passes 6-1. Councilwoman Wilcox dissenting.
Okay, thank you. Next agenda item.
Here's what you do now.
Item 2B, approval of amendment number 1 to city contract number 2015-170A1 with B&W Fire Security Systems to increase the annual not-to-exceed amount to $55,000 for fiscal year 2016, general airport engineering, golf, solid waste, wastewater, and water funds.
Mayor and council, good afternoon. Last fiscal year, the council approved award of a contract to B&W Fire Security Systems to establish pricing for fire alarm intrusion monitoring and fire suppression services for city facilities. Contract expenditures at that time were estimated to be about $20,000 a year for departments that are in the Facilities Management Fund. And depending on the type of facility and the location of a facility, part or all of a facility may or may not be in the Facilities Management Fund. Effective with the current fiscal year, we brought in 5 fire department facilities into the Facilities Management Fund and charged the fire department for those services. We also have professional building assessments conducted of the fire stations, and during those assessments, certain deficiencies were noted in fire protection and monitoring. The fire stations, a couple of them had critical items, and so the Facilities Management Division budgeted in the current fiscal year to have the projects done to correct the deficiencies that were noted. The one-time capital cost to correct the deficiencies in the fire departments is approximately $25,000, and that will necessitate an increase to the contract that we have with B&W. B&W also provides alarm monitoring of fire, intrusion, panic, and other alarm types for the city. They inspect backflow preventers and repair monitoring equipment such as smoke detectors, fire panels, and fire risers. Departments that are not within the Facilities Management Fund also use the contract pricing that we have through B&W, and the estimated expenditures of the departments that aren't in the fund are estimated at approximately $10,000. So the ongoing annual cost of monitoring and repairs in total is about $20,000. I know this is a little confusing. To assure compliance with the city code, an update to the contract is needed to increase the annual not-to-exceed authority to $55,000, and that is a combination of $25,000 for the fire station one-time capital outlay costs, and then an additional $30,000 in alarm monitoring and repair, fire extinguisher inspections, backflow preventer inspections, and a little bit of contingency money. So combined with the $30,000 and the $25,000 for the fire stations is the $55,000 total contract expenditure. And again, it's about $30,000 annually of recurring costs for this type of service. Facilities Management is going to rebid our contract coming up over the next few months for the fire alarm and intrusion monitoring and fire suppression services. And that scope is going to include monthly monitoring of alarms and repair, fire extinguisher recertifications and replacement, backflow preventer assembly inspections, sprinkler systems, and kitchen hood systems. Funding is available in various funds in the current fiscal 16 budget for these expenditures, and if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any comments from the dais?
Thanks, Mayor. I have a question. These are all fire stations.
The one-time capital projects are for the fire stations.
Why today? I mean, we're talking about these things have been insufficient over the years. Now why all of a sudden are they being noticed and becoming an issue?
Councilman, the best answer I could have for you there is that previous to July 1st of this fiscal year, the maintenance in the fire stations was left to the fire department. They have other duties that they need to tend to. Part of the ICMA recommendation was to relieve them of those maintenance responsibilities and bring the facilities into the Facilities Management Fund so that facilities people could monitor and maintain those stations. You do have to have fire monitoring at fire stations. It sounds ironic, but it's happened in the past where they'll get a call and they get in the truck and take off and something's left on the stove, or some other type of issue happens where they do have a fire. So it's just timing is my best answer.
I guess I just find it interesting that we have firemen that are concerned about safety and inspecting their own stations, but yet now we have a bill for the fire stations. That's all.
Councilman Lemerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Similar to Councilman Blair, only from a different perspective. You know, we haven't seen the new models for delivering fire service that we've been expecting for the last year and a half coming forward. I'm not so sure we're going to have all fire stations, all 5 of them, open. And yet I'm being asked to approve spending money on all 5 pieces with hardline infrastructure. And I'm not quite sure that we're not going to be putting in hardline infrastructure someplace that might be closed next month.
Mayor Pro Tem, I understand your concern. Regardless of whether the fire stations are operating, they are still city assets, and so it would be prudent of the city to go ahead and monitor them for fire and intrusion. The most expensive projects that we have are at the airport and at Smoke Tree. They're like less than $7,000 for each facility. So I think it's well worth the investment to go ahead and get those assets up to speed so we can have the proper monitoring so that we can make sure that they're safe.
Thank you for your explanation.
Any further comments from the council?
I guess I would be concerned about liability. If we know that we have situations that are not monitored and then we had an issue, I would certainly be concerned about liability.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Any comments from the public? Do I have a motion?
Mayor, move to approve amendment number 1 to city contract number 2015-170A1.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Vote, please.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, next agenda item.
Item 1C, award of city contract number 2016-109 for design of the Sundog Transfer Station Improvement Project, Phase 1 electrical improvements to Shepherd Westnitzer Incorporated, an amount not to exceed $82,948, Solid Waste Fund and Streets and Open Space Fund.
Mayor and Council, the Sundog Transfer Station houses the Solid Waste Division, the Street Maintenance Division, and also the business support function of the Field and Facility Services Department. We also have the solid waste hauling contractors employees. They report there in the morning to begin hauling operations over to the Gray Wolf landfill. And when the employees arrive in the morning, especially this time of year in particular, we don't have any lighting. So the employees have to navigate the parking lot and into their work areas in the dark. They basically get out a flashlight or they use their headlights on their car to try to make their way about the facility in darkness. And the employee parking area is paved, but it's wearing, and we did have a risk management asked us to have a look at. We got a couple potholes in there. And then the areas where the materials are stored and our equipment lines are at, they're dirt. And right now it looks really bad with the snow and it's melting. Then the plows have been in and out of there. We essentially undid some work we had done previously on our hauling road, trying to keep it smooth for everybody's operations. And after all the snow and rain, it's in pretty bad shape. We've also had some people, have some trip hazards there. They walking along in the dark, you don't see a big pothole, you step in it. And when our on-call employees show up in the middle of the night, they arrive in darkness and they can encounter other kinds of hazards. The improvement project that we're looking at would include installation of electrical infrastructure to support parking lot lighting, the equipment ready line lighting, automated gates, and power to our workstations. Future improvements, if approved, would include paving and drainage to eliminate dust and air pollutants, level uneven surfaces, and establish drainage. The estimated construction cost of the electrical improvements is about $262,000, but it's really a lot of work to get the wiring out there we're on about a 50-acre site. The Public Works Department had issued a request for proposals for this project, and the design professionals responded to this request, and a review was done, and Shepherd Westnitzer was the top-rated firm for the project. The city's standard professional service agreement will be used if this is approved, and the milestones, hopefully, if it's approved, will get going on the week of January 18th, with design being completed in July, and then master plan completion in September, followed by construction in later this year, probably about November. We have $120,000 available in the current fiscal year for the design phase of this project, and it's being cost shared between the Solid Waste Fund at $75,000 and 1% Streets Fund has $45,000 budgeted, and the improvements will hopefully be started in 2017. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the council?
I have one question.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with the project. It sounds like it's something that's very much needed for the safety of our employees. But my question has to do with how you came up with the allocation of the funding, $75,000 from solid waste and $45,000 from open space.
Councilwoman, the majority of the facility is used mostly by solid waste. We have the transfer station there. The hauling contractor comes in and out of there. All the solid waste trucks are in and out of there. Streets mostly is just in there. They park their vehicles overnight, and then they get up the next day and get in their equipment and leave. They're not constantly coming and going as much. So it was just a split between the two so that it wasn't all just on the solid waste fund or on the streets 1% fund.
Well, it's actually the Streets and Open Space Fund. And I think you probably know the source of my objection is that there's too much coming from the open space part.
It's a contribution, and in the future projects, we can look at having a little bit of a different percentage if it's necessary.
Okay, good.
Any other comments? Any comments from the public? Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve contract number 2016-109.
Second.
Do you have a motion and a second? Please vote.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Item 2D, approval of amendment number 1 to ADEQ consent order WS-18-13 wastewater fund.
Well, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
This item is for approval of amendment to an earlier consent order we have with ADEQ. If you'll recall, the consent order required us to set up a pretreatment program for fluoride at the airport wastewater treatment facility. We had a year to get that program running and ensure that fluoride levels were appropriate. That year ran mid-2014. Because of the pure water or pure wafer matter, we weren't able to fully implement that pretreatment program. So we have requested this amendment with ADEQ. It'll allow us to wait until full implementation until after the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled on the pure wafer matter. This amendment will also allow for some interim control measures for fluoride at the airport. I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Have any questions from the council? Any comments from the public? Do you have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve amendment number 1 to ADEQ consent order WS-18-13.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Vote, please.
Passes unanimously.
Okay, next item.
Item 2E, legislative update.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just made it back from Phoenix, so I'm glad that last item I got here was pretty short. Anyways, this is the second day of the current session, and as you probably read in the newspaper, yesterday was really kicked off with the governor's State of the State address. And so we'll have to see kind of where things shake out with his agenda. He did announce that he will be submitting his budget on Friday, so we'll be taking a close look at that. And you can expect that to be something that comes forward at your next update regarding legislation. Also yesterday, Representative Noel Campbell did drop his bill regarding structured sober living, which was the result of 4 committee meetings that were held this summer after the speaker called the committee regarding drug rehab recovery homes. And that was a multiple party committee that came to the consensus that this would be a good way to address the issue. related to sober living homes that are proliferating across the state without regulation. I would also point out that I was down at the Capitol today with our contract lobbyist, Barry Aarons, and he was able to get me in with Debbie Lesko, who is the senator that has been working for over a year on pension reform, and it sounds like things are going very well for her regarding pension reform, and that there may be very significant changes that are able to be agreed upon by the multiple stakeholders she's been meeting with. Her next meeting is this Thursday, and Barry Aarons did request to be invited to that, to be in the loop on what's happening, and she expects to have draft legislation out very quickly thereafter. So being that it's the second day of the legislature, I don't have a lot other than that to report, except that we already have 238 bills submitted at the state level. So we'll be going through those with updates from the contract lobbyists on things we should focus on and coming back. One of those bills I would suggest that we be very opposed to. The residential rental elimination bill has come back from Representative Mitchell out of the Yuma area. That bill, as written right now, would only impact Pima County and Maricopa County, as there are population limits included in it. But as you're well aware, oftentimes once something becomes law, it very quickly starts to encompass the rest of the state. So that is something that would be a huge financial impact to the city of Prescott based on our reliance on the local sales tax for general fund and street funding relative to our city operations. So with that, I would open it to any questions.
Any questions from the council?
Yeah, what does being very opposed to it mean?
Well, I guess what that would mean is, even though right now, based on the population limits of not affecting a city under 100,000 or a city within a county of under 500,000, that the precedent that it would set as impacting a significant tax base for our limited local revenue options is not something that we would want to be neutral on, despite the fact that the way it's written, we wouldn't be impacted right now. So I would suggest that we log in opposed to that bill if it makes it to committee.
Okay, so you're suggesting that we log in opposed to that. What if we would want to log in that we are supportive of the efforts of Representative Campbell, especially on the behalf of Prescott?
That absolutely, I would recommend relative to the bill that we have been working with him on since last session. That I will be providing you a bill number for that, and at the next update, a number of other bills as they continue to come in. We can talk about city position on a variety of bills.
Okay, well, I would think on what we're trying to accomplish, acknowledging the fact with the proliferation of the drug and alcohol rehabs in the city of Prescott, with the acknowledgement of the heroin issue that we do have here in the city of Prescott, that we do something supportive of our representative down in Phoenix, other than just sitting here saying that we're supportive. I mean, is there a resolution? Is there something that we would do from a positive perspective to demonstrate that as a council body as a whole, we would choose to support his efforts on behalf of the city of Prescott?
Mayor Pro Tem, it's the pleasure of the council if you'd like to submit a resolution. I think all of our efforts to date have been very supportive of Representative Campbell's work done at the legislature on this issue, and Barry Aarons is working very closely with Noel Campbell to work on small stakeholder groups and to continue strategy on moving that forward. So there are any number of things that we could do. However, probably the most important is to provide that hands-on support on a daily basis through our efforts with the Aarons Company, and Barry Aarons being there to help him get meetings, get with different senators and representatives, explain the city's position, explain the issues that we're facing, and then also strategize at different points during the session what our next steps should be. It will be a moving process depending on what way the session goes and timing for the bill and which committees it is assigned to.
Well, I thank you for being our hands-on daily interface with the issue. I would like to see something a little more formal out of the council, and would encourage my fellow council to let's come up with some form of resolution to show support for what Noel Campbell's doing on behalf of the city of Prescott.
Absolutely.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Allison, on pension reform, anything that goes to the legislature feels like shifting sands. So I'm wondering, at this point in time, could you, do you know of any details about what that reform would look like?
Well, the details, I wanted to call you Representative Councilwoman Wilcox. Sorry, I was down in Phoenix today. Representative Wilcox. The details are very much in line with what the League has been talking about, with what the Reason Foundation has been talking about. Some of the key goals are to assure that going forward for new hires after a date certain, there is a much more shared burden cost-wise between the employee and the employer. The goal would be 50-50 sharing, which would be a huge difference from what we experience with existing employees, where the city is currently paying close to 80% and the employee is capped at 11.65% in the public safety personnel retirement system. Some efforts underway to eliminate some of the end of career programs, such as the DROP program, which removes the payments into the system and directly provides a funding account for individuals for their last 5 years of service and requires a date certain for them to then retire, at which point they're receiving benefits. An increase in the pensionable age, not necessarily the retirement age, but the age at which someone is able to actually draw their pension. Some changes to governance, which is still under discussion by the stakeholders. Some defined contribution options. There are discrepancies between different types of employees, whether they're a firefighter or a police officer, and depending on which city they work for, as to whether they are eligible for Social Security, which has significant implications both in how much is withheld from their paycheck when they're working, but also how much they're eligible to receive in retirement benefits when they do retire and throughout their retirement years. So though that's the highlights, I imagine this bill will be very long. There are a lot of other moving parts related to the governance, related to details on how they would need to change the system, leaving certain things in place for existing contracts and making changes going forward, and then a piece that would require constitutional adjustment through a public vote. So the goal is for that to move forward very quickly once the session gets going, so that there's a possibility of getting on the earliest ballot possible.
Well, it seems to me that whatever reform happens will mean fewer benefits for public safety. So I think this council and the manager seriously needs to think about how we can offset that with better salaries for our public safety officers, so that we're not losing them all to other cities.
Councilwoman Orr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Allison, I was looking at the paper recently, and it talked about Governor Ducey and his priorities in education and economic development. I'm not seeing anything, and just asking your opinion, are too many people, is everyone aware of the problem that PSPRS is causing the state? Is this not on Governor Ducey's radar? How do we get this out? There's really nothing that's more significant for us than to get PSPRS fixed. And I'm just not certain that this is being realized statewide. And is there anything that we as a council can do other than send a lobbyist to say this is a big deal to this city, and it's going to be a huge deal to many cities down the road? If we don't take care of it, it's almost like they've got blinders on. No one's really paying attention to this. I know some things are happening in the legislature, but is that only in the legislature? Is the administration, is the executive branch also looking at PSPRS?
Councilwoman Orr, I couldn't say definitively how closely they're looking at it. With it being such a huge issue, though, I can't imagine that they haven't been involved with the discussions relative to the work that Senator Lesko is doing. However, when the words public safety are mentioned, we have to sort of assume what that means. And it may be that Governor Ducey's mention of public safety being a top priority may mean having good public safety that's sustainable and that we can afford in this state, which may relate to the retirement system. It wasn't an incredibly long speech, and so there are some things that we'll have to infer and then see how they go throughout the session. I know that Mayor Oberg has been in contact with a number of our elected representatives up through the food chain, and so that is another way that we can be involved. However, we did offer our support through meeting with Senator Lesko and explaining the major issues that we face here and our city council's desire to kind of face it head on and really try to address the problem on a local level, recognizing that we are going to need that support from the legislature working to make the changes that are necessary to keep that system sustainable in the long term. So there are a lot of different things that we can do, being that it's the second day of the session and realizing that there are significant strategic things that we need to take into account. For example, finding out what comes out in the executive budget on Friday will be a good indicator, as well as to what some of the governor's goals are relative to the public safety that he mentioned outside of the specifics that he talked about regarding probation and parole. So I'm not trying to talk around the issue, but it's day 2 of the session, and it is a living, breathing thing at the Capitol, and so that's why I'm here speaking to you each time you have a council meeting to let you know what some of the movement has been. I have a call on Friday as well that will give us a little bit more insight, but there's definitely interest by all of the cities in reform. Sometimes when you're trying to be strategic and work with a number of stakeholders who haven't traditionally agreed on such controversial legislation, what happens is a lot of things get done in more private meetings. Information comes out, and then you struggle with any possible amendments and trying to keep as much of that together as possible. So I think the goal with how this has been proceeding over the last year or so has been to get the stakeholders who have a huge lobby on board with some of the changes so that we can get as much reform as possible that is as sustainable and reasonable as possible, but with buy-in from the stakeholders who have a very strong, have the numbers behind them, if you will, regarding a lobby.
Well, I guess I go back to what I said when you presented the legislative agenda, is that I think we as the council, anything that we can do to be not necessarily obnoxious, but we need to get on the agenda of the governor's office to say this is bad for our city, and I think we need that bully pulpit to help us. So whether it's the governor's office or the legislative, it just feels like it's just moving so slowly and not necessarily in our direction. It's just frustrating. I would like to have seen him say, we're going to fix this. We're going to fix this system. We're going to work with the stakeholders and let's get it done. And it's like it's really not being talked about. So that's a concern. I know it's just my opinion, but thank you.
Well, I guess I would just say it is being talked about. It's just not been talked about in committee because the session started yesterday. They need to drop a bill, and then all of the public committee meetings will start. And this is not uncommon for how bills actually end up happening and moving successfully through the legislature every year. So we just don't hear about them until they move through the legislature, much like we're not hearing a lot publicly right now because they're still in stakeholder meetings on the pension.
Councilman Chiska.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Allison, does any of this legislation have the possibility of affecting the 72+ million that we already owe?
Councilman Shishka, there is a small potential with the ballot measure that could impact the existing liability a bit relative to how the permanent benefit increase is calculated. That still does have some question marks, as does anything that has to go to the ballot. First of all, it has to get to the ballot. Second of all, it has to get approved on the ballot by the voters of the state of Arizona. And then if there are any legal challenges to what was on the ballot, then it would have to, face those legal challenges and come out on the other end on top of the legal challenge. So if that were to happen, there could be a small positive adjustment, but what I'm hearing is it wouldn't be significant. to the existing liability, but going forward, it would give us a lot more stability on being able to project what our long-term costs are relative to the ongoing increases to benefits for retirees.
So there's a glimmer of hope, just a glimmer, but a glimmer of hope.
There's a glimmer of hope, and I would just remind you that making a sustainable system for new hires going forward is what, in the long term, will stabilize the system so that we don't ever reach the point we're at today again.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Similar to fellow council here again, specifically Council Woman Billy here. Sooner than later is better than not. Fact of the matter is there's reluctance on the council, I can speak for one, to fill vacant positions, knowing full well we're dumping them into an unsustainable system, and we're burdening the residents of the city of Prescott with an unsustainable retirement plan. And if there's no change, why would I ever agree to go spend their money for more retirement for the gift that keeps on giving for the next 50, 60, 80 years, and then maybe for some of the family for another 50, 60, 80 years like we're stuck in now, and this not be fixed? This is really significantly impacting our ability to go fill vacant positions in public safety, knowing full well we have not gotten any option with regards to doing something different than what we know is broken.
I hear you loud and clear. That is a key point in the City Council's legislative agenda, which has gone out to our stakeholders. And I agree with you that something needs to be done, and that was the conversation that we had supporting Senator Lesko's efforts today and getting an update on where she is on that.
Any other comments? Thank you, Ms. Elms.
Thank you.
That completes our agenda. As I said before, at the last voting meeting we had, that I would probably end all of them with just a quick comment on some people in our history that I think have made very good comments that we ought to listen to. I remember when Ron Paul retired from the Senate, he said that he never thought it would be so hard to sell freedom and liberty to people of the United States. And it's kind of interesting. John Adams, in a letter to Abigail Adams in July 1775, said, "But a constitution of government once changed from freedom can never be restored. Liberty, once lost, is lost forever." That's all we have for today. Thank you for coming, and this meeting is adjourned.